Hello and welcome to another episode of the Hindus in Focus podcast. I'm Zubeda Hamid, your host for today. The world of science was rocked early last month when US company Colossal Biosciences announced that it had resurrected the dire wolf, a species that went extinct more than 10,000 years ago. Three pups, named Remus, Romulus, and Khaleesi, are now living on a 2,000-acre enclosure in a secret location. Videos of the wolf pups howling went viral across the internet, as did photographs of their snowy white fur. How did Colossal achieve this? Through genetic editing. After first extracting DNA from an ancient dire wolf skull and tooth and studying its genome, the company claims that it then took the genome of a grey wolf, the closest living ancestor of the dire wolf, and made precise edits at 20 locations across 14 genes. Most of these edits were cosmetic changes to do with fur color and size. This modified genome was then implanted in embryos, and surrogate dog mothers gave birth to the wolf pups. While the science sounds immensely exciting, several experts have contested the claim that these pups are dire wolves. Can a few edits in a genome truly recreate a lost species? Can these wolves behave just as the real dire wolves did, given that the ecology and environment that the dire wolves existed in no longer exists? The company claims that it wants to secure the health and biodiversity of our planet's future. Its next project is to de-extinct the woolly mammoth. Is this the right way to go about conservation, and can it even work? We delve into the many aspects surrounding the science and ethics of this project with Karthik Shankar, Professor and Chairperson, Center for Ecological Studies, Indian Institute of Science, Bengaluru. Hello and welcome to the Hindus in Focus podcast, Karthik Shankar.
Thank you, Zubeda. Happy to be here.
Karthik, to start off, could you tell us how the company Colossal Biosciences generated or created these dire wolves?
Right. So I think the important thing to sort of take note of is that the process is quite different from cloning, such as in the famous case of Dolly, the sheep. In cloning, we you essentially uh, reproduce the entire genetic code of an animal. So you take a cell and you use that cell to sort of create the replica of that particular of that animal, so of the entire genetic code of that cell. In this case, what they've done is they've taken a gray wolf's genome, uh, edited certain sections of it, the sections of it that create the morphology of a direwolf, and then edited inserted those sections into the gray wolf genome, and then used that to inserted that DNA into an ovum that doesn't have the nucleus in it, and then use that's your starting cell from which the wolf you know is created. So that becomes the embryo and the direwolf. So it's in a way one could think of it as a modified a gray wolf that's been modified to look like a direwolf, as much like a direwolf as scientists today um, can can imagine it.
So they say that even humans and chimpanzees, our genetic material is almost the same, right? Something like 99% is
Yep,
almost the same. Obviously, you
absolutely.
won't mistake a human for a chimp and the other way around. So would you say that these minor genetic changes or edits that they have made does not really create a direwolf again, or is that just the fact that it looks like one, or it looks like what we think they used to look like makes it the same creature?
So there's several aspects to this. One, of course, is that our genome can be 99% the same, um, but the genes that are expressed can be quite different, right? And it's not just the 1% of the genetic difference in the sequence divergence, but also in what is expressed that results in the difference between, the morphology of humans and chimps and say gorillas, or the difference between tigers and lions. So it's in the expression of those genes as well, and sometimes the small differences, as in our case, over the period of a million years, of say having a slightly enlarged brain, actually led to sort of runaway process of one thing after another that led to more and more complex societies and so on. So uh, small changes can have large effects, and all of those effects don't have to arise just from sequence differences, but they can also arise from the things that are being expressed in the genome or not. Uh, Coming, to your question about whether these edits create what the original direwolf was, uh, I think we will. I think we will never exactly know. Uh, but uh, on the flip side, uh, scientists are never 100% sure of anything, right? And so if I have evidence to say that this was the this was the approximate morphology of the direwolf, and these are the genes from which it's coming, these are the ways in which I don't know if if any of the I haven't looked at whether any of the uh, edits can or do influence, for example, differences in behavior. But let's say that was possible. If I were able to make those edits to the genome, I would still be I at a at a superficial level approximating what that animal was, and uh, that might it's a value judgment as to whether that's good enough or not.
So, would you call it a de extinction at all?
I think my last point speaks to that, right? In the sense that what does the word de-extinction mean? And I think it's important to it's and perhaps the like a the word like the word conservation, right? And de-extinction today is invoked in the context of conservation, right? That these animals, these are the animals that we imagine as are the earth that we want, right? And
Correct.
conservation is about the same thing. And conservation is a very fuzzy term in the sense, if you ask five different conservation scientists, they'll all give you you know, different explanations for what conservation is. They'll also give you much more. Every single person, you know, you can go out and ask people, what is your imagination of what the world should look like, or what the earth should look like, what a conserved world should look like, and you'll get not 100 opinions, you'll get 100,000 opinions, right? So but of course, as scientists, we do try and narrow down on what these are. And with de-extinction, I can give you like just off the top of my head a few possibilities. Right? It could be an animal that bears resemblance to an animal that lived in the past and is therefore able to give um, humans an opportunity to engage with that nature, right? So, I mean, for example, if we said Jurassic Park was possible, why should Jurassic Park exist? More than watching a movie, it like going to a national park and seeing a tiger. I'd be able to go to a national park and see well, we're in India, so I shouldn't say T-Rex, but let me say, Rajasaurus, right? So, as a naturalist and someone who's obsessed with fauna and flora, sure, if that technology existed and there was a park that I could see real live Rajasaurus, I would go there, right? So that's one, which is just it's the zoo, it's the zoo function of de-extinction, right? The second, or perhaps the first, is your more philosophical idea of uh, bringing back something that was in its original form, right? The Not the thing that looks like and behaves like, but the thing itself. Uh, and I'm not sure that even cloning could really achieve that, right? How do I bring back the genetic diversity of that species today? Unless I can now clone the complete and well preserved cells of a large enough number of individuals, of males and females, that I at least have a starting stock to work with, right? Um, and that seems in the realm of fantasy, but that would be the second, like actually bringing that genetic stock back, right? But that's still just the animal in and of itself. How do I bring back that ecosystem, or do I bring back something that a functional ecosystem where that species has a role? Is that what de-extinction is? So I think you have to ask yourself, which of these de-extinctions do you want, right? Or which of these is valuable to you?
That segues nicely into my next question. Are they really dire wolves if the ecosystem in which they once existed, we don't have that anymore, it doesn't exist any longer, and they don't have parent dire wolves to teach them? How can they be real wolves if there is no mother wolf and father wolf to teach them how to be a wolf? So, what would you say that in that case, that factor of the de extinction project doesn't work?
I'm not sure the parenting is necessarily the factor. There are many things that animals do by instinct,
Correct. But if the
and
prey population, for instance, doesn't exist, what they used to have
you need the
10,000.
prey.
Correct.
You need the prey. So I mean, even leopards and tigers and other animals that were hand reared were taught to hunt by their human parents, and so for animals to recover some of that ability, I think is the easier part of the task. The harder is the functional ecosystem component. So while I've kind of been, like as this, like scientists never take a stand, right? We say it could be A or B or C. I'll take a stand, which is that in the current form where it's only an edited, it's the edited DNA of a gray wolf, and is not in the ecosystem that it experienced when it lived. This is the zoo function that I described, right? It's nice. I mean, and sure, I mean, am I saying it's not valuable? I'm not saying that. Maybe it's like I said, I'd like to go see a rajasaurus, right? So maybe there are people who've heard about direwolves their entire life and would go to see one. But it's really, even if it's in a large enclosure in a safari and thousands of square kilometers, it's still just a very big zoo, right? And so I'm skeptical about its being ecological de-extinction.
Correct.
It is a
Can
it's
it
some other
perform
form
the
of.
ecological function that it used to perform?
Now you're getting to the question of what. Now I have to ask you why. Why do we want? Why do we want the ecological function of a direwolf
Let's
when?
let's put that
Yeah,
on hold for 1 second because I want to move
sure,
on to a couple more questions about ethics, and then let's
sure.
explore the broader question of what it can happen ecologically. Tell me a little bit about the kind of criticism that this project has evoked. There are multiple people who have said that um, what happens to these three wolf pups now, right? So now we have three wolf babies living in a 2,000-acre enclosure, which is obviously very big, but like you said, it's at the end of the day, it's just a big zoo. What happens to them? They can never be released into the wild because they are the first such creatures and they have to be monitored. And even if Colossal Biosciences did go ahead and create the woolly mammoth, what next? Are these wolves live in packs? Elephants are extremely social creatures, as we in India also know. So then what happens? What happens to the future of these animals if we can create maybe one or even five or 10? Like, is that even ethical to do?
I believe that um, there's a large body of nature ethics literature where on which also impinges on conservation, where at one end of the spectrum you have people that believe very strongly in individual rights, right? So the entire animal rights movement, your deep ecology, your mostly biocentric movements that place value on individual rights. Now uh, I'll there's been a long decades of conflict between them and the folks that either are anthropocentric or not anthropocentric but still believe in larger sort of ecosystem function, right? And say I want to preserve an ecosystem for the sake of its value, intrinsic value to humanity, and not because of the services it provides. So the contrast to individual rights can be, some form of nature rights, but it can also be anthropocentrism. Now, I think these ethical questions arise from, again, I'll tell you what I think, but it arises from which rights position you take, right? If you take an ecosystem rights position, I don't care what happens to individuals. Individuals die in nature. Animals eat other animals. They die of disease. They die of rarely of old age, right? And if I take an anthropocentric position, I could say that I still don't care about individual rights. I want ecosystems, species not to go extinct, ecosystems to be balanced, to be sustainable and resilient, and I can take whatever I need as long as I don't disturb the resilience of the ecosystem. In both of these, what I'm what we typically call the left leaning positions, individual rights don't matter. And if I were to take that position, then I don't really care what happens to those pups. I mean, I'm sure they're cute and all, but it's not an ethical concern for me if I were to take those, and I personally do. The ethical question arises if you do take that animal rights centric position where every chicken or every you know um, tiger or every whatever deer, or and therefore in this case every single pup that was born, uh, if the life of each individual one matters to you, and you know I leave it at that, in the sense that that's where the ethical concern comes from. um, you know a large number of conservationists and a large number of people take the left position of larger ecosystems, or even larger ecosystems that include humans, which is sort of an anthropocentric or anthropo-inclusive view, in which case the ethical question about the individuals doesn't arise. There might be other ethical questions which I think you're going to come to.
Fair enough. I just feel bad if there's going to be one woolly mammoth. I mean, what will it do? Elephants have.
That's that's a fair point. I mean, but the answer to that is very simple. The sense that, like, why would they make just one woolly mammoth? And the woolly mammoths don't care if they all come from the same. And if they're going to edit genomes, they're going to edit the genomes of different individuals. So there's actually be more genetic variety than you would have in cloning. And look, I'm speaking a little bit. Um, I don't work on that for a living, so but a little bit off the top of my head. But yes, if you took a wolf's genome and edited it, you could take many and edit those, and you therefore drawing on a variety of genetic material. And if you can make one, there's nothing to stop you from making 25.
That's a fair point. Okay, moving on to the next ethical question. Again, brought up by many, many people, is that, of course, we are spending in now, not we, but Colossal Biosciences is spending enormous amounts of money, resources, technology, expertise, all kinds of things on bringing back extinct species when we right now have thousands of species in danger. Is this a valid argument? Could some of this tech be used in conservation projects that are more urgently needed right now?
Oh, absolutely. I think this is, the question here is not ethical but economic, right? And if you ask yourself why are they doing this, obviously because it's cool and, like, sounds great. And I imagine that there is an economic outcome somewhere. People are going to come out and see this animal, right? See these animals, right? Or as a consequence of this, this is not an altruism project. Or this, how would I know? I don't know the folks at Colossal, but I mean, looking at all of these projects that clone wild animals, that bring back extinct species, that transloc have whatever, like these iconic translocations of animals that went in extinct in some location. Nobody will know what I'm talking about, right? so
I know, and I think that should be my next question, but yes, go on.
yeah, no, I'm kidding. Of course we know. But all of these are really prestige uh, and what is it? Prestige and honor projects, right? They're not. There is there is no functional outcome to these projects in terms of the larger scale uh, challenges of conservation that we have in the world today, or environmental sustainability. Honestly, if you want, I mean, I'll push myself and tell you that I think the amount of money that goes into elephants and pandas and tigers and sea turtles, which has been my life's work, and whales and dolphins, way too much money, way too much attention. I think conservation has struggled because we've spent too much money, too much effort, uh, um, and too much time and attention on just a very small number of iconic species.
Would
Uh,
you say that's because these are the cute and cuddly species?
Cute and cuddly as a metaphorical term, right? The cute and cuddly in some way or the other,
Absolutely.
right?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, so absolutely, it's the conservation of the cute and cuddly. Um, and there was a logic when 60 years ago, when organizations like WWF and others, when they started out with the panda as their logo, and nobody thought about conservation, they were like, we got to get everybody's attention, and so they call flagships. And it's a good concept. That's how we use sea turtles in my work. But you sort of end up becoming obsessed. You start missing the woods for the trees, and you end up focusing on and becoming obsessed with the flagship, and sort of then miss the bigger picture. So the de-extinction, things like the direwolf and the mammoth are just like, you take that logically and pull it back in the other absurd extreme, right? You're now not just focusing on an iconic extant species, you're now spending all that effort and money on an extinct species, which, in my mind, what is the possible, you know, um, uh, direct, I mean, a larger scale positive outcome for environmental conservation? I find that hard to, I find it hard to connect the two. I'm still not saying it shouldn't be done. You could still do it as a cool project, and be like, oh, people will come because they'll come to this giant zoo and they want to see woolly mammoths. Sure, maybe even I'd go, but I just don't think it links to conservation and the way that people have made de-extinction out to be.
So that brings me neatly into my last ish question about Colossal's theory behind all of this, or what their motto has been, is that they want to help reverse climate change and biodiversity loss. And that, for instance, the woolly mammoth would go to Siberia and parts like that where it used to be possibly, and where climate change is being felt extremely badly because of the permafrost loss, etc. And that these species would then eventually help be able to reverse the permafrost loss and all of those things, and therefore make an impact on climate change in that way. I'm guessing if there are enough woolly mammoths in order to be able to do all of this. Is that in the realm of possibility? I mean, maybe 10 years ago we didn't even think a dire wolf could be made. So is that scientifically possible?
See, there are two pathways through which individual species or groups of species can impact these say conservation and climate change. One is through their ecological function. And my question would be, what is the ecological function that they're going to play that would enable this pathway towards mitigating climate change?
Can we bring animals back into the ecology without knowing how they will function now? Have invasive
So,
species not taught us that?
yeah, absolutely. And Zubeda, actually, you don't need invasive species. I'll give you two examples. Elephants can be extremely destructive inside forests, right? They can completely like wipe out one species because they're not conservationists. They're just doing their thing, right? And they are known as ecosystem engineers. And as an ecologist, it's fascinating to see how the impact of a large herbivore can change a landscape. Green turtles wipe out seagrass meadows. Us turtle conservationists have been trying to conserve them for 50 years. Numbers have gone through the roof at many sites around the world. Seagrass meadows are now like, suffering. So forget about de-extinct animals. Animals that we've helped sort of like bring back from low to high numbers are actually, many of them are having negative impacts on systems, and that may not continue forever. I'm just saying that it's not that simple story of when this animal returns to its former glory, everything is hunky dory. Sorry, unintended rhyme, but you see what I mean, right? We can't even know with extinct species. With de-extinct and the number of mammoths you would need, I was going to say this at the beginning. How many do you think one will need to impact Siberia, even if we knew it was going to be positive? Think of the numbers that you would need, not five, not 10, not 100, not 1,000, right? So all of it seems very, the direct ecological whatever connections seem very hand wavy to me. But there is a point to be made, I think, about like that people do conserve forests. The 50 years ago, forest conservation in India started with the idea of you know Project Tiger, and we must protect these forests for tigers. So they, as flagships, Whereas umbrellas, they can
Correct.
still be, they might still be valuable. I don't think you need extinct species for that. Um, that the trade-off of how much money I used to create that, uh, I imagine one could have created you know, the awareness and behavioral change in humans. That at least is what I think we should be focusing on.
You said something about how, forget invasive species that wreak havoc in a particular ecosystem that have been brought in perhaps to do some good but actually don't do any good, but even existing species can do that, you said, right?
Yes.
So there's always a delicate balance in nature, isn't there? Like between what we think is going to happen, but what actually does happen. Do you think anybody can predict that? As in, is this a dangerous thing to try and do when we don't know what could potentially happen out there in nature?
It is dangerous. I mean, and I think the idea of ecological balance also is a well-worn myth that probably dates to certain century-old ecological concepts and uh, um, those the Gaia hypothesis and things like that. James Lovelock about the Earth as a whole, as an ecosystem in balance. Ecological balance is a tenuous thing. Balance comes and goes. Ecosystems are easily destabilized, and some can go from one stable state to another stable state, right? And what we're seeing now is just what we're seeing now. And so, if you go back and measure, actually, they've been undergoing quite a lot of changes, over historical time. Uh, Large time frames like millions of years, but even small time frames like hundreds or thousands of years. Ecosystems go through all sorts of change. Animal populations go up. Nothing can support that density. They crash. We're trying to bring balance in this little tiny slice of time, right? Which is really I think an impractical way of looking at the problem. Uh, But having said that ecological balance doesn't exist, nevertheless, things that could have large scale impacts. One, I think our general principle is that one has to follow the precautionary approach, the precautionary principle, but also perhaps following up in your question about you know um, the economics of all this. Look at the most effective but also equitable ways, right? Where in all this de-extinction is there talk of the problem in the world, the environmental problems in the world today are not about species going extinct. it's about it's actually about marginalization of communities, marginalization of rights. It's about inequity of income, right? Income gaps are increasing. These are the environmental problems of today, not some tigers and elephants. And so, to me, as much as de-extinction can be a flagship and focus attention, it can also be a red herring and really take away from the most important issues that beset us. So,
That's a nice note to end on. Thank you so much, Karthik, for speaking to us today.
thank you, Zaveda.